I think there's actually in school, like when I was 5, like the way that you interact with girls is different. You kind of feel like there's a unity. There's things that you have in common which you don't have in common with just other people. So it was like a gender-based similarity that I noticed. You know, when you're young and you start to notice gender differences, because like when you're like, I guess when you're like a baby, everyone just seems like you just differentiate between like long hair or skirts or stuff like that. But when you get to a certain age, like 5 or 6, and you actually interact with your own gender in a certain space, you actually start to notice much more nuanced characteristics of your gender.
It's really hard to like pinpoint a certain like moment, but I guess the first time I became aware of like gender differences was when I was really little. I think I was like 5, and I went to a wedding with my parents, and I was really confused about how it was practically like 2 separate armies of people, because the guys were all wearing suits and the girls were all wearing dresses. And I asked my mom, how come like none of the ladies are wearing like anything but dresses and none of the guys are wearing anything but suits? And I found it confusing. My mom found it like amusing that I was just wondering why women wear dresses and guys don't. But I think that's when I became like aware of the fact that men and women are different, and that I have to be different to like the guys, because there are also kids who were like, you know, like little boys my age, and they had to wear suits, and I had to wear a dress, and I didn't like that. So like that's when I became aware of it, I guess.
I don't think there was a particular time. As far as my memory goes back, I remember I was in the kindergarten and I kind of saw that girls and boys being separated. I was more of a boy child. I had the short hair, and I remember that other girls would be like looking different than me because I was more like having this boyish haircut, and I had this like need to fit in, but that would be expressed later. I think that I became a woman as I observed the others, like how they behave, and I've been told like, you know, girls should wear dresses, girls should play with dolls. Then later on I had 2 older sisters, so I saw like they putting makeup on, they trying to look female, they going to dates, and they were older than me, so I kind of steal their makeup and try to look more like them and copy them in a way. You know, we would dress up as Spice Girls, and I would more abandon on playing with cars and toys of this sorts. But also I had this pressure from, I remember like when I wanted to play football with guys, they said like, oh, girls can't play, you know, and I felt like, why, you know, because you're a girl, you're a woman. Later on I remember I started to going to elementary school, and you know, you had this first kind of like hormonal changes, and I started to feel different, and I started to feel weird, but I at the same time like enjoyed that very, you know, female kind of like differences that made me a woman, what shaped me a woman, how I felt to be having this power to change what I am. You know, you can change your face, you can change so many way of your look and who you are. So if I wanted to be more of a boy that day, I would decide and dress up like a boy. If I wanted to be more female, like, you know, I would put on dress and more started to be princess.
I feel like I've always felt a woman. Like, there hasn't been one specific moment in my life where I've grown into a woman. In terms of gender, I've always, you know, never felt like I could want to be a boy, or, you know, I've always felt like biologically woman. I guess if I had to take one time in my life where I definitely felt like, you know, something had happened to make me more womanly, would have been when I lost my virginity, because that felt like I had discovered my body again, and it wasn't just me anymore, it was also with someone else, you know, entering my world. So that definitely felt like something new and rediscovering myself as maybe less as a girl but more as a woman.
I think I've always relatively identified as male. I was born as a guy, I identify as a guy, but, you know, don't get me wrong, I think it's important to be in touch with your feminine side, and there's nothing wrong with dressing up like a woman occasionally. I think the idea of becoming a man is something that's been socially generated to try and, well, a combination of making sure that you buy the right things and also identify to a kind of heteronormative culture.
Also, there's a difference, like, I think, to express yourself and do all these sorts of art with your body for yourself, and there is a difference between doing it because of the pressure from society. And besides that, like, once you're aware of this, like, okay, actually I can have more fun with myself because there is not a one certain pattern. It's loads of fun when you realize that you can be like this, you know, Virginia Woolf's Orlando, like you change, you can dress up as a person from a different century and be a woman of 15th century, but have this all abilities of you know, and the freedom of 21st century. So
well, personally, I've grown up in a family of older, so I've got my mum and then an older sister and lots of older women in the family, and so I was kind of always babied, and yeah, and so I think the first time I felt like a proper woman was when I actually came to university, to be honest, when, you know, you have to do things for yourself and you can't rely on anyone else.
Now that you say that, I kind of think that for me it was also a little bit when I came to university. I mean, people always say, like, when you start going through puberty, when you get your period, that's when you become a woman. Yeah. And I sort of had an experience where when I got my first period, my cousin was sort of, it was at an event, and we were sort of having a nice dinner or whatever, and she was saying that, you know, we shouldn't be celebrating her academic achievement, we should be celebrating me getting my first period because now I'm a woman. But I think when I came to university, my perceptions on a lot of things changed a lot, and I learned a lot more about feminism and sort of grew up from, like, the Catholic upbringing that I was brought up with for so much of my life, and sort of, you know, made my own ideas and perceptions on things, and I think that's sort of when I became a woman myself.
Well, I don't really feel like I've become a man yet. Obviously there's different ways to look at the question. The first one being, like, about maturity and about feeling that you've developed yourself enough as a person to feel somehow whole. And the second bit is about when did people start treating you based on your sex/gender. Like, when was I referred to as a man for the first time? The reason why I say I don't really feel like I've become a man yet, obviously, is very much based on the first thing, which is, like, personal development. I think what people see as a man is, like, someone who, like, certain defining characteristics, like, he knows exactly what he wants, he knows exactly what he's doing, he doesn't really need to ask many questions, doesn't really need to say much. I guess it's a very traditional view of masculinity, but it's something that I strive for anyway, because I don't know, there's some sort of like it seems like you're fulfilled as a person if you manage to live up to those standards of manness.
Well, the first time I became a man was, I don't recall a specific situation, but I think it was quite early, and earlier than majority of my peers, because I was raised by a single mother, as my father passed away when I was 4, and I was growing up with my mom and my grandpa was fairly old already in that time, and my mom used to drink a lot, so I did have to learn how to take care of myself and the family and the household kind of in advance. So I think that shaped me to be a man quite early, as in taking responsibilities for the actions that I make, and to treat my mom respectfully, but still kind of educate her on what she's doing wrong and what she's doing right, and I think that made me a man.
I think throughout my life I'll probably always question if I am a man. I don't know. I think sometimes I feel like a boy, sometimes I feel like a man. I think the first point in which I thought I felt like a man was, I don't know, maybe when I felt like I conquered something in myself. Maybe a sort of adolescent period in my life where I conquered it, and also maybe, I don't know, a loving and caring for my mother.
Well, I think obviously I've just had my mum, and she was, I guess, rolled mum and dad into one, and yeah, so I've been lucky enough to have a really sort of strong woman as an example to me, so I don't feel that I've necessarily missed out on like the manhood sort of, or the man figure.
No, I think it depends on everyone's experience, and my own experience was, you know, to have sex you need two people, so obviously my experience meant that it was important for me to have someone else also acknowledging myself as a woman, but I mean, it's obviously something that is so subjective, and everyone has their different experiences. And you can, you can find yourself a woman when you get your periods for the first time, or when you get your first job. So it's when you get independent from the money. So it's definitely a personal experience for everyone.
Year 7, year 8, you know, you like start to hit puberty and stuff. You start to develop. You sort of get to know who you are, get to know yourself a little bit. And when I was younger, all of my friends, they were mainly boys, like these two friends called Ben and Sam, you know, Max, Matt, Toby, Tom, all those people, and they were great. And they were always my friends back in lower school. So I'd be the one running around, like playing football with them, you know, playing stuck in the mud, doing a bit of wrestling, laughing and stuff like that. And I was always a lot sort of bigger than all the other girls as well, because I got my growth spurt early. I was like the tallest in my year up until like year 9. And so as in year 7 and year 8, when, you know, those gender roles, I feel, start to come out, I didn't necessarily conform to that. Like I was loud, I was Larry, you know, I shouted, I played with the boys, I had like quite a funky dress sense, that sort of thing. And I was really into my sport, and I really like loved that about me, that I just, even again, I had that kind of lax attitude, like I don't care who I am, I don't care what people think about me, like I feel great, I feel so happy just like running around with all of my boyfriends having a really good time. And unfortunately, when you don't conform to, you know, this sort of like, you know, girly girl who spends her time in the bathroom putting on makeup, flirting, talking about boys, talking about hair, talking about films, that doesn't happen to go unnoticed when you're in a high school environment. And this was kind of the first time I ever really got affected by, you know, not conforming to like what a typical high school gender role was, because there were these group of boys, and they were quite horrible actually, and they used to call me stuff like stupid, man, fat, ugly, lesbian, man. I had a nickname called Dave, and it was really, really hard and really, really horrible, because I'd just be sort of walking down the corridor, and then people would like shout abuse at me and stuff, and it was really, really horrible. And I found it really hard sort of just even going to school every day, because I felt like a big part of me was being criticised just because of the way I act and the way I behaved. And yeah, it was really tough actually, but I never changed, because I loved who I was, and I've always been fortunate. I've had really, really amazing group of friends, like my friends back home, my group of girls, like they're all so incredible, so amazing, and all my friends here, they all sort of like love me for who I am, and love me for my loud personality, my sort of possibly not conforming to what is, you know, female gender and stuff. And it was a really tough time, but in a way I'm sort of grateful, because it's made me much stronger and much more confident in who I am as a person.
Yeah, definitely. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that like manliness or like manhood relies a lot on self-determination, and so it's also sort of like a power struggle. Like you want to show that you're able to do things by yourself. You don't need any help, because asking for help would be showing weakness to some degree. Note that like there's many instances where I have asked for help, and most of the time I don't feel bad about asking for help at all. But there's definitely certain social situations where if you're asking for help as a man, you're seen as weak.
I still feel like I'm a guy, but I feel like I'm accessing a feminine side of myself that generally in our culture is oppressed. And it's not, a lot of guys do it, and but generally I think a lot of people, particularly as children, are taught that that's a weird thing to do, and it's not something I do habitually, and I'm not ashamed to say that I do it. It's a bit of fun, and I think it allows me to get in touch with a level of femininity, because everybody has masculine and feminine sides, and I think gender is relatively fluid. Lots of people will identify as different genders regardless of their genetic sex, and that's cool.
Well, I went to an all-girl high school, and the beginning of my high school experience, like my freshman year, they were very much about you being your own woman and being independent in the workforce, and it just academically and everything like that. And then I found that throughout my 4 years, that kind of idea sort of like went away, and they didn't really promote that as much. So I kind of think as I sort of bridged away from the Catholic religion is when I sort of found a lot more independence in myself, because they have so many perceptions about not having sex and like not using birth control and things like that, which I think that you should have your own ideas and your own sexuality and stuff, and also their perceptions on like homosexuality and things like that weren't really with my ideas of feminism. So I think, yeah, the Catholic religion sort of, in a weird way, formed a lot of who I am as a woman and what I think of feminism.
When I can have
you know, relationships and friendships with people in which I feel really equal. And when I can sit in a seminar, and people have always talked about in seminars whether or not, I don't know, particularly in philosophy, which is an interesting area, whether or not men participate more because they feel like the history of philosophy has only involved men, so girls don't speak up in those seminars. And it's things like having a seminar where I feel like I can talk freely and not be worried about my gender and whether or not, as a woman, I can have an opinion on this philosophical argument. That's a place where I feel like I can just, on a human level, not have to worry about that.
It made me realise that being a woman doesn't really entail anything apart from being your subjective self, because, you know, everyone and everything is different. Like, with society we have these pigeonholes, like, you're a woman, you go there, you're a man, you go there, you're sporty, you go there, you're musical, you go there. And it made me realise that, like, that is wrong, how we're, like, pigeonholed and stuff. And so it's never really affected me as a woman at all, because, like, I've always been comfortable in that. I've always been, like, assured in that. And it's never really been anything to me, sort of gender. Like, it's entirely subjective. Like, I do what I want to do, you know, I see who I want to see, date who I want to date, do what and it's just, yeah, it's never really been anything apart from, you know, like, my body. So yeah, it's, in terms of how it's affected me, it's actually how it's affected me in a really positive way is that since I've got into, like, looking at more, like, feminist things, studying women, studying, like, feminist legal studies and stuff, it's made me realise that, like, women, we're so amazing, and we're so intelligent, and we're so beautiful, and that and again, it's not because they're women, it's because of, like, the people they are and what they want to achieve, and that they're not letting their gender restrict them or hold them back in any way, because they've just, like, stuck two fingers up to all the people that are like, oh no, you can't do that, you can't do that, you know, you just stay in, raise a family. And these women, they're just like, no, I'm gonna just go and do what I want to do. And it comes down to, like, the character and the strength that they have in their core. And it's made me realise, like, how amazing people subjectively are more than anything else.